this is Liling Ping from Trekaroo, and we are here in California. And of course, like everyone else, we are sheltering at home to keep everyone safe. And while we love to travel all the time as much as we can, right now, the best thing for everyone to do is to stay home. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be curious and still engage with the world. So lucky for us, our friend Ryan Connolly from Hidden Iceland is here, and he is going to be taking us today on a virtual field trip of Iceland and show us some pretty cool spots that he's discovered and explored on his own and with other families. So Ryan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much. So my name is Ryan, as you said, and I'm one of the owners of Hidden Iceland. We're a small, very small family-run company based in Iceland, where we focus on taking small groups and families to some of the more off the beaten path places in the country. So that could be searching for the northern lights in the middle of nowhere. That could be hiking on a glacier. It could be helping round up the sheep on a farm. It could be discovering new ice caves. But all the time, we're always taking our favorite guides along on the tour. And these are people who are either volcanologists or geologists or glaciologists, people who will add a huge extra component to the trip so that you're not just going somewhere to take a picture, you're actually learning about the area and understanding it and hopefully remembering it for your entire life. So that's kind of us in a nutshell, more of a personalized service.
Okay, so I have my two kids, Abby and Zachary. Zachary, come in a little bit, say hi. And we haven't been to Iceland before. And also here with us on this virtual field trip is Claire. So Claire, would you like to introduce yourself and your family?
Sure. So I'm Claire. I'm with Life with a Baby, and I also have a travel blog, Drop the Golden Sun. And this is Caitlin. And Ethan is over here. He will pop in and out. And yeah, so we haven't been to Iceland either, and we're really excited to learn about it, and especially the glaciers. So looking forward to it.
I'm curious to know if any of you kids know anything about Iceland, where it is, you know, what it might look like. Does anyone have any impressions? Do you know? Caitlin? No? Okay, so we are at your mercy, Ryan. We don't know a thing about Iceland.
Okay. Well, how about this? I want to talk about the thing that inspired me to come to Iceland, and that's glaciers. And one of the many things we do is hike on glaciers and discover ice caves. So why don't I show you a little 1-minute video to show roughly what we do? Does that sound good?
Do you have a question about what we're talking about today? Leave your questions in the comments below and we will get right back to you.
Okay, what did you guys think? Inspired yet?
I would go.
You would go. Excellent. Okay. Yeah, so what you saw in the video there is one of the more remote places of Iceland. So to walk along the side of the road or do a normal hike is okay. But when you join someone like us, who has experience hiking on glaciers and discovering ice caves, you have to go just a little bit further. And you have to do things like put on helmets.
Cool.
Yeah. So the helmet stops you from bumping your head when you go into an ice cave, which is pretty cool. We have ice axes, and we use these for stability. So we jab them into the ice. Some people like to do this. And to stop ourselves from being all slidey and slipping around so that we can walk on the ice into the more forgotten places, we wear these spiky things on our shoes. I don't know if you can see them. They're called crampons. So with all of that and with an experienced guide, what we like to do with kids, with families, is explore places where potentially no one has ever walked before. So that's what we would do if we were hiking on the glacier. But what I found is that most families, especially if they come in the middle of winter, are really focused on the ice cave components. So can I just ask a question? Do you guys know what an ice cave is, or rather how an ice cave is formed? What do you think, Zach? I like that.
Formed.
I don't know how it's formed. I know what it is.
Is it formed by, so I'm going to give a guess, and maybe you guys can think too and can give a guess. My guess is that maybe there's a crack in the ice. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good guess. But the way, what do you guys think? No? Okay, well, an ice cave is formed because of two different processes. The first one is that in the summer, when a glacier or a glacier is moving, it will melt. And as it's moving and melting, it creates these weird structures, and they're constantly melting away. So they'll be formed, and then they'll crack, and then they'll form, and then holes will appear. But generally speaking, in the summer, they just disappear. And this is a constant process regardless of the temperature. Glaciers and ice melt, and glaciers move. But when you get to the winter, when everything gets really cold, all that moving and melting freezes in time. It stops temporarily. And that temporary structure that lasts for maybe 3 or 4 months is what we go into. Some of them are cracks, some of them are holes, some of them are vertical V-shaped features, and luckily some of them are incredible ice caves. So it's up to us as a guiding company to find the ones that are beautiful, but also very safe to go into. And those are the kind of ice caves that we go into. The one thing that people often get wrong when they think of ice caves is that they've been there for hundreds and hundreds of years. But the reality is glaciers are there for hundreds of years, but the ice caves, or the structures that are formed from the melting, last for maximum 3, 4, 5 months before they become unsafe. So every time someone comes to Iceland and joins an ice cave tour, they might be looking at pictures from last year and thinking, wow, that's a beautiful ice cave. I bet I'll get to see that one. But the reality is we have to find new ones every single year. So if you guys are okay with it, I'm going to show you a little set of pictures, just some of the ice caves that we have experienced over the last 3 years alone. Do you guys want to see some new ice caves, or old ice caves, actually?
Are you enjoying our virtual field trip? Be sure to click the like button or to subscribe so you know when our next field trip happens.
So I'm going to run through a series of pictures here. Each one of these are ice caves, or potentially the glacier that we're walking on in order to get to it. One thing to consider is that every single one of these ice caves no longer exists. So when you see someone standing inside these structures, they've either melted away completely or they've collapsed. So that's why I'm saying when you come to Iceland eventually, once everything goes back to normal, you'll be walking into an ice cave like this, but definitely not this. So they can form beautiful circles like the one you see here, or they can be massive caverns with lots of rocks and dirt at the bottom. They can have rivers running through them where you have to stand on ledges with lots of ash mixed in with the blue ice. They could have massive open archways where they're at the very base of the ice cave. Smaller holes with what appears to be big bubbles, but is actually just the shape of the ice that's flowing from wind and water. And you can see where I'm going with this. Every ice cave, some of them are filled with water. Every ice cave that we go into is unique, different. Sometimes it requires a lot of walking to get to, up into the hills and into the mountains. It's actually a drone shot of the ice over the top. Sometimes you have to walk all the way up there to get to the ice cave. And other times it's much easier where you're walking on flat ice to get to. But one thing is for sure, the only ice caves that we personally take people to are always, always, always blue. Different shades of blue, but definitely always blue.
That looks amazing. Oh my gosh. It's like you're walking inside a crystal or something. It's so amazing. Yeah,
so even for me, like I've been in all of these ice caves and many others, but every time I discover a new one with my customers, the experience is just incredible. It's something that I'll never get bored of. This one is actually my favorite from 2016. The glacier actually formed this particular ice cave from very little melting, but lots and lots of bending. So the glacier basically smashed into the side of the mountain and buckled and bent and squeezed together and created a fold that allowed you to walk through this kind of snake-like feature. That one only lasted for about 6 weeks and then disappeared. So that's some of the ice caves that we go into on our travels. What do you think?
I had a question about the color. Like, how does it get those different variations of blue? So pretty.
Really good question. Yeah. Actually, why do you think it's blue? Before I tell you.
I guess maybe similar to snow. Sometimes when you're looking at snow and there's a lot of it at the bottom, it looks a little bit blue. Maybe just the light going in. I don't know.
You guys know what? It's,
I think it was like the reflection from the sky. There's something that I forget.
Okay, Abby. Okay, so Abby thinks that it is the reflection from the sky that makes it blue. That's an interesting thought. Do you
I don't know, someone told me a while ago. Yeah, Papa told us.
So we're forgetting what we have learned. So Ryan's going to tell us.
Excellent. So let me start from the beginning then, just so you kind of get a grasp, because Claire, you were actually quite close when you talked about the snow and how it compacts down, and then at the very bottom of that snow you see this kind of a blue tinge. And all glaciers in the world have to be formed from snow. It can't be formed from a frozen lake or from rain or anything like that. It has to be snow falling, being compacted down. It usually takes about 100 years or so for the snow to be squished by more snow landing on top of it for hundreds of years, usually hundreds and hundreds of feet in vertical compression. And then as it squishes together, all the snow crystals that are normally like this start to organize and become very flat, and all the molecules are squeezed together, and it means that when it becomes ice, when it's compressed into that solid block, when light comes into the ice, instead of bouncing back out like it does with the sky, all of the light goes into the ice, and because of the very organized shape of the molecules, all of the wavelengths of red and orange and green get absorbed and don't come back out. So effectively, the ice is not blue. It's more that the very fast wavelength of the blue light is the only one that escapes. So it's the only structure of its kind that is formed from the vibrations absorbing light, as opposed to what light manages to get back out, because blue is the only one that actually manages to escape.
Wow.
And that's why glacial ice is blue and most other ice is not, because it's organized, is a good way to describe it. Compressed.
And what about the variations in the blue? Are they all the same kind of blue, or do you have some that are more pale in color versus darker and deeper?
Yeah, absolutely. The reason they have different colors though is because although glacier ice is very, very dense, it still has some remnants of what it used to be, snow. So there's lots of air pockets and lots of dust and lots of dirt stuck in the ice. So with any inconsistency or any cracks, light will manage to bounce around and come back out. So that means that the bright blue might be more like a sky blue, or the sky blue might be more like a kind of a pale blue. Or if there's so much ash in it, it might actually come across as a kind of a blackish, kind of greenish color. And then if the light is very low, it can come out as almost yellow or kind of a pale green as well. So blue is perfect. All the other colors show inconsistencies in the ice. Yeah.
Do you guys
Did that all make sense?
That's really cool.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things that we like to talk about when we take people into ice caves, aside from the adventure of walking on a glacier and discovering something that is running out or disappearing, is climate change. Because Iceland being closer to the poles is very heavily affected by the rising global temperatures. People ask if walking into the ice cave or walking on the glacier affects the ice itself. And okay, there might be a minuscule amount of change, but the reality is the global temperature rise is the reason that these glaciers are disappearing and these ice caves are collapsing faster than they used to. So although you're seeing something incredible and beautiful, what you're actually getting is a visceral reaction to something in nature that's not going to last very long. So we hope that we give you a great experience, but also you'll take something away with you to understand that climate change is not something to worry about in the future. It's something that's already happening quite rapidly, closer to the poles, so Iceland included.
Have you guys found that it is harder to get to these ice caves over the years? Is it perceptible that, you know, over the years, you have to hike further to get to these ice caves?
Yeah, and the last, I'm going to try and share something again. Okay, so this ice cave, so the question you asked was, is it perceptible that it's getting harder to get to the glaciers? So this ice cave that you're looking at right now is at the very, very edge of the glacier, which is miles and miles long. When you walk out of that front area into the daylight, that's the end of the glacier. It's in miles, it's about 5 miles away from the road. 10 years ago, you used to be able to walk from the road 5 minutes away onto the glacier. So in the last 10 years, we've lost huge amounts of ice that mean that we have to go further and further. We have to take super jeeps, we have to go on hikes, we have to walk for long areas, just so that we can find next year's ice cave. So as the glaciers melt, as the ice caves collapse, we do have to go further and further and further. And yes, perhaps over the next few years, it won't be possible to hike on these glaciers anymore without going up into the mountains. So if I was to say when would be best to come to Iceland, I would probably go as far as saying as soon as you can, basically.
You don't want to do a lot of hiking to get to the glacier.
Yeah. I mean, the hiking part's fun, but when it gets to the point where you're going up in elevation, things get colder. You're more affected by the weather, and you have to. Yes, you would wear the equipment that we give you, but then you would have to be trained in much more extensive glacier hiking techniques. Whereas right now, we can take people as young as 10 years old into ice caves without any issues whatsoever, or on a private trip even younger. And it's because it's easy to get to. Whereas in the future, it may well be much more difficult. So, yeah.
Ryan, I have a question. When you do the glacier hikes and tours, are people like attached with a rope, or can you just walk freely on them? Like, especially with kids, how secure is it?
It's a really good question, and it gives me an excuse to pull out my rope. So whenever we go on a tour with customers, We do not attach anyone to a rope ever, because if you imagine if one person is attached to this rope and then the other person is attached to another part of the rope, and then one person falls, then they're just dragging this person with them. So yes, they're still together, but they're together wherever they've fallen. So the idea is that we bring all this stuff with us so that if the worst case scenario happens and we need to use ropes, we have them handy and we're trained up on any form of rescue procedures. But in terms of safety, it's better to just stay together as a small group under the tutelage of your guide than to actually be attached by anything. The only reason I would use this for any non-emergency procedure is if we were going to do ice climbing, which is always really fun. But if you're wanting to go into an ice cave, you shouldn't need to ice climb to get to it. But it depends on the trip you want, really.
Ryan, can kids do ice climbing?
So the youngest we take people ice climbing is 15 years old. That's the youngest we do. There's a few different reasons for that, but when you get to you have to be a certain size and certain weight in order for ice climbing to work properly with the axes that we use. You have to use a special type of boot as well as the crampons, so the spiky things for your feet. So although we can technically take you ice climbing when you're younger, we limit it to 15. But the glacier hiking, where you're physically walking on the ice, which could have many levels of ice climbing, we can do that as young as 10. And if it's a private trip with just one family, we can sometimes go a little lower as well. It just depends.
So now, do you guys know why is it that a glacier has the blue colors to it?
Because the light goes into the ice, and the colors, the only colors that can escape is blue.
Yes.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah. So the easy way to think of it is all the colors of the rainbow go into the ice, but only the blue escapes. That's the way I
Why
like
is
it.
it that only the blue can escape?
Good question. So every color of the rainbow, so red, orange, yellow, green, blue, etc., all have different wavelengths. So sizes. The waves can flow like this, which is how light is shown, or they can flow like this, or this, or this, or this, all the way to very, very fast. And if they're moving very slowly, or they have long wavelengths, like the red spectrum, then they are the ones that get stuck in the ice very easily. But if they're frantically moving around, like the blue colors, then they are much better at hitting things and escaping. So it is only the fast flowing or the fast wavelengths that manage to escape. So blue and technically violet come out of the ice whenever you see a glacier. It's just our eyes aren't very good at picking up natural violet. They're only good at picking up blue.
And you said, so the glacier and the ice caves are there generally just in winter. So when would they start? When would they end?
So you can do glacier hiking all year round. So the glaciers are there have been there for thousands of years. And in the summer, it's actually easier to walk on a glacier because the actual ice itself gets so crunchy because it keeps melting and then refreezing and melting and refreezing. So it's really easy to walk on, but it's too warm to go into an ice cave because if an ice cave forms in the summer, by the next day, it could have collapsed. You never know. It's only in the winter when everything gets really, really cold that the ice cave will form, and then you can be certain, or you can check if the ice cave is going to be safe for weeks on end, and then you can go into the glacier as opposed to on top of the glacier. So if you're going to do a glacier hike, you can do it any month of the year. It's completely fine. To do an ice cave tour, it's from November until the end of March, when it's nice and cold.
So how cold is cold?
Well, Iceland, believe it or not, is nowhere near as cold as people think. In fact, the average temperature in Iceland in winter is higher than New York City. So the average temperature in January, say, the coldest month of the year, is around 33, 34 Fahrenheit. So it just skirts around freezing point. So it doesn't need to be very cold. It just needs to be an average level of cold so that when there is melting, it doesn't counteract any of the refreezing. The coldest I would say that you'll experience in Iceland is maybe 20. That's probably as low as you're expecting. You get the odd day that's colder, but with a bit of luck, you won't get anything below that.
So in terms of latitude on the Earth, where is Iceland in relation to New York?
Well, I know that the latitude of Iceland is between 64 and 66 degrees. I think New York is like 58 or something. I'm not sure about New York. But what I do know is that Iceland should be a lot colder than it is. But because of the Gulf Stream, so warm water flowing up from Mexico and the equator, the water actually, if this is Iceland, the water flows up and around the country and keeps the country much warmer than it should be. So maybe we should be experiencing -20, -30, like you would expect in the same places in Canada, but instead we're getting, well, warm is probably a relative term, but warmer than it should be.
I mean, for me, that sounds fantastic. I thought it would be much colder. You know, it's cold Iceland, so to know that our winters here are so cold, and so when you think going to walk on a glacier, you're expecting it to be extremely cold for it to be secure. So knowing that it's not going to be completely freezing actually makes it a more pleasant idea of the trip. So
yeah, the only thing you should really worry about when it comes to the weather in Iceland is just it gets a bit windy. Because it's such a temperate climate, we do have a lot of wind in the winter. But generally speaking, you'll never have a full week of bad weather in Iceland. You might not have a full week of good weather either, but you'll always have spots of nice, calm, potentially blue sky. It's actually blue sky right now. It's close to 9 o'clock at night here, and we still have the sun out. So when we talk about the weather being nice, you know, we're start of April and the sun is only just setting now. In the summer, it's going to be sunny the whole time.
Wow.
24 hours of some form of daylight, which is quite nice. So yeah.
And about Northern Lights, what time of the year can we see the Northern Lights?
Well, the Northern Lights, the only thing you need to see the Northern Lights is a clear sky and darkness. So you can't see it in the summer because there is no darkness. So that means as early as probably September, you'll be able to see some form of Northern Lights if you're lucky. And that runs all the way through till about now, actually, so early April. I always recommend September, October, November. These are the best months because although it's dark, you still get a lot of daylight as well during the day. So you can do things like glacier hikes during the day and then spend the night looking for the Northern Lights. But ice caves and glacier hikes, these are guaranteed if you pay for them, assuming the weather is okay. But Northern Lights is never a guarantee because one, it's cloudy a lot of the time, but also you need the sun to be sending electrically charged particles towards us at a great speed in order to have a reaction in the atmosphere and give us that green dancing curtain. So I always say do fun activities during the day, and if you see Northern Lights at night, great, but if not, then that's okay.
So I saw the Northern Lights for the first time last year, and I found it very, very surprising because it looks so different in real life than it does in photographs. And I discovered that it has something to do with light waves again. So there's a relationship between glaciers having blue color and how these light particles, our eyes cannot actually see the spectrum the way that a camera can see the greens and the purple spectrums that the Northern Lights are emitting. So that was super cool.
Yeah, I always say that the Northern Lights are one of the few things that look better in your camera than in real life. But you do still get the odd day where we have, so the thing that creates creates Northern Lights is something called solar wind. But if you want to see the dancing curtain where it's all these multicolors and it's like in the pictures, you need a solar storm. And that means that, oh, you have to go soon. That means that you almost have to predict it ahead of schedule, because you need a lot of energy coming from the sun in order to create all those particle vibrations in the atmosphere. So yeah, you sometimes get the amazing time, but other times it's just, yeah, a little bit less exciting. Depends on the night.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us about these amazing adventures in Iceland. I think I'm pretty excited about the idea of going there. What do you think, Abby? Would you like to see those ice caves? Yeah. Okay, back. Ice cave. Caitlin, are you excited to see one?
Caitlin wants to go when she turns 15, so she can go on the climbing.
Oh, yes. Okay. So.
Adrenaline junkie over here.
Awesome. So anyway, thank you so much for showing us your beautiful, beautiful pictures, Ryan. And we hope that you guys are faring well in the midst of this pandemic, and that you are getting a chance to go out into nature, even though we're all supposed to be keeping social distancing. I know that us living in a very urban area, it's a little bit difficult to get out too far. But I think for you guys, it sounds like it might be a little bit different, because you were telling me that you were about to head out to one of the glaciers.
Yeah, and we can, so in Iceland there's social distancing, but when you're on a glacier, you're very far away from basically anybody. So as long as you can maintain 2 meters from your friend, then there isn't any reason why you can't still go out and experience Iceland properly. There's no tourists right now, so it's actually quite quiet. It's nice.
Mm-hmm. Lucky you guys.
It's
all right.
To explore your own backyard and all the gems, so that you can share with us next time.
Yes.
Exactly, yeah. It's almost a nice little holiday where we can go and explore and find new stuff to share with everyone next time. Hopefully you guys will come.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Thanks very much, guys. It was a pleasure.